Furlong, the French call girls, Tilly Devine took the desperation of these women to a whole new advantage. They rarely saw them as human, especially Tilly. They saw them as merely products for her sale. She was the worst of the lot of them. If you worked well, behaved yourself, and were loyal to Tilly, you'd be looked after with cash, drugs, roof over your head, protection. If not, you'd be bashed, slashed, mutilated, turned out into the street like next week's rubbish. Lillian was seeing this way too often. Women physically abused from trying to sell their bodies just so their families could eat. Women slashed by razors in retaliation to the gangland war. Women found hanging, overdosing in parks and alleyways, drowned in the harbour, victims of botched abortions, laying dead in the streets or stumbling through the back alleys. All collateral, so Tilly and the underworld could live on. Tilly would wait at Central Station, looking for runaway girls to groom and take home, but Lily would get there first on her dawn patrols, which she continued to do after Maud. She'd try and turn these girls around and send them home, away from the hell that they were pursuing in the city, which infuriated Tilly. And through this, our resentment filled this young English girl that slotted in with everyone else in her life. She hated the cops with such a fury she would spit and hiss, "I hate you," amongst other awful things as they walked by. Tilly's fishing at Central was mostly successful. Other women just wanted the thrill of the adventure or to break away from obedience, but this was Lillian's mission, to save as many women as she could and to make a difference. She tried and did fail at protecting some of these women, like Nellie Cameron, the girl with the kiss of death, and Pretty Dulcie Markham, the fallen angel who didn't want to be saved. She'd try and check in on the welfare of these young women who remained in the city, and for years afterwards, they would come into contact with Lillian as runaways. Some were happy to share their stories about their lives, for better or for worse. Some even gave Lillian the honour of becoming godmother to some of the children, born from informants and women she tried to help get off the streets of the underworld. One of the biggest showdowns, though, through the Razor Wars was on a cold July night of 1930. Lillian, by this point, is a veteran of 15 years. She knows the players, she knows the game, she'd seen and done it all. Her toughness, her courage, tenacity and confidence has grown with everything she's experienced. On this particular night, the police had surrounded Kate's house on Riley Street in Surrey Hills, hiding in alleyways behind cars and away from the cockatoos and lamplights, though each would be revealed by a passing car that thankfully never came. They were waiting for the signal to pounce on the house. They were waiting. Then the signal was made, and the rush was like an adrenaline-fueled terror as no one knew what would be behind those doors. Someone with a knife, a shotgun, a room full of men with razors, or even prostitutes used as cannon fodder. Let your imagination run wild. Bursting through the front door, though, seemed way too easy, and everyone inside was relatively calm. With some girls around the table, and women, sitting around with cocaine and cash on the table, they seemed a bit too relaxed, like they were expecting the police. Still a bit shaken, but nonetheless expecting. Once in, Lillian ran upstairs with the newly appointed psychic Nellie Mitchell and began rummaging through Kate's bedroom while Kate stood straight and proud in the corner, glaring burning eyes into the back of Lillian's head. They'd already found the coke downstairs around the table, but needed to pin Kate specifically. This was the checkmate after a long game of chess. Either Kate wins and the police end up with nothing, or Kate leaves in cuffs. All bets were on as a crowd gathered outside. The stakes were high for all involved, most importantly for Kate and Lillian. Will the crook beat the most fierce female detective in Sydney, or will the Queen lose her title? Suddenly, Kate snatches at the tin full of cocaine on the mantelpiece, throws it into the fire. Lillian follows suit, diving into the fireplace, grabbing at hot coals and embers, finally grabbing this red-hot tin. She pulls it out of the fire. Had it burned up? There goes the evidence. But Lillian prevailed. The jig was up, and she happily led the arrest for one of the underworld's most notorious figures. Kate was marched out by male officers, but Lillian's respect and reputation was won over with the force. Lillian did what no other could. She nabbed Kate Lee. Kate was promptly arrested by Detective Wickham, and she screamed and kicked her way out to the cop car, awaiting her like a horse and chariot, taking her away to His Majesty's Hotel. Lillian's career growth was slow. Starting in 1915, she'd make Special Sergeant 3rd Class in 1923 and 1st Class in 1943 at the age of 59. During this time, she founded the New South Wales Women's Police Force and was in charge of all the women until her retirement. In March of 1947, she was invited by the New South Wales Governor, Lieutenant General John Northcott, to Government House. With the support of some of her male colleagues, she was given the privilege of being awarded the King's Police and Fire Service Medal for Distinguished Conduct. This was yet another first in the Commonwealth, with being the first woman to receive this honour. But age finally got the better of Lillian. With decades of fighting the worst crooks in Sydney and writing and typing up every single action that took place, her final showdown was with arthritis in her hands. The unbearable pain that she had tried to hide for years finally led to her retirement on the 2nd of December 1949, just shy of 35 years on the force, at the age of 65. Lillian was awarded the Imperial Service Medal for her dedication as a civil servant after completing at least 25 years of service. Her retirement was celebrated across the nation and gave her the title of Gallant Woman. Though now retired, she wasn't eligible for a pension or even superannuation. A woman who had dedicated her entire life to the force was rewarded with no financial support afterwards, unlike her male colleagues. The Lord Mayor of Sydney put out a call to raise funds with her, with many people donating. It barely cracked a livable wage. She was presented with an illuminated address and £200, about 13,000 Australian dollars, and the police department allowed her £455, 6 shillings, 5 dimes. That's about $31,374 in lieu of an extended leave of absence. But she received no superannuation. One of the other problems was, the paperwork at the time stated that she had joined 6 months too late to be eligible for the New South Wales Police Force Pensioners Fund, being 31 instead of the required 30. In 1965, at age 80, she was granted a weekly special pension allowance by the New South Wales government of £3, 10 shillings, about $241. This relinquished her old age weekly pension of 10 shillings, $34. This was in recognition of her service, which was set up in a way to not interfere or diminish the existing Commonwealth pension. This was 15 years after her retirement. Lillian eventually moved in with her nephew Norm, the son of her closest sister Muriel, who had moved to Sydney earlier in Lillian's career. She moved into the granny flat out the back of his house in Hurstville Grove. Lillian continued to help the community by donating her time to fundraising stalls in the Southern Highlands and in Sydney. A quote from her nephew Norm states, "Her kindness to people, especially the downtrodden. Her toughness and resilience. She had a hard time in a man's domain, yet she stuck it out. Shows her commitment to improving the lives of so many." Lillian ultimately outlived the most famous of the underworld figures, being Norman Brun, Phil Jeffs, and of course Kate Lee and Tilly Devine and Nellie Cameron. Lillian spent her final years in the Harold Hawkins Court Hostel for Senior Citizens in Leichhardt. She spent her final days there surrounded by family and reading her favourite detective novels. She passed away at Lewisham District Hospital. Lillian requested not to have a police funeral, which was respected. However, the police commissioner organised a police guard of honour as a mark of respect for her work. Her ashes remain still to this day in Barrel Cemetery. As you go through the main driveway, on your right-hand side as you enter the gate, you keep following a red brick wall made from the local shale of the Barrel Brickworks. It stretches for about 10 metres. At the very end, facing into the cemetery, is the plaque of Lillian Armfield, which reads, "Lillian May Armfield, Australia's first policewoman. Died 26th of August, 1971. Ages 86. Rest in peace." In 2001, Lillian Armfield was inducted into the Victorian Honour Roll of Women. The rest of Australia eventually followed suit with the experiment of New South Wales. South Australia hired their first female police officers with Fanny Kate Cox and Annie Ross in 1915. Victoria in 1917 with Madge Connor and Elizabeth Beers. Western Australia in September 1917 with Helen Dugdale and Laura Chipper. Tasmania, October 1917 with Kate Evelyn Campbell. Queensland 1931 with Eileen O'Donnell and Zara Dare. The ACT, the Australian Capital Territory, in 1947 with Alice Clark. And finally the Northern Territory with Faye Bartlett, Margaret Craven, Norma Bailey, Shirley Booth and Joanna Wendler in 1961. We're going to end with a final quote from Lillian. "Some girls were vicious and dangerous. Some were weak and easily led astray. The varying degrees of their wickedness made life for me more interesting and often more than exciting. But I always felt that most of them had a chance of redemption, and I tried to see that they got that chance." Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to another episode of the Tour Guides Tour of Australia, this incredible story about one of Australia's most important women. I hope you enjoyed that story. Now, I promise there won't be as big of a gap between episodes ever again. If you would like to experience the Razor Tour in its entirety, please reach out to Dark Stories on their website. I'll put the link down below and find the Razor link within that. Likewise, if you'd also like to get more information about some of the other tours that I've done or do, I'll leave some information to those links in my email down below. I'll also leave the information for the other books and podcast episodes that I mentioned as well. So if you want to do some research for yourself, learn a bit more, you're more than happy to do so. Also, if you are a tour guide or know of someone who is a tour guide and you reckon they'd enjoy yarn on this show, please reach out to me, let me know through the email or share this episode with them. That would be fantastic. The music was composed by Scott Ed and the logo by Melinda Behrman. That is the end of the tour. I'll see you on the next one. Hooroo.